Hey, everybody. Welcome to Moment of Clarity. Thanks for joining me. Please take a second to hit subscribe if you're not, and to hit share, to share this with people. Hey to everybody in the comment thread already. Please take a minute to pass on the word about the stream. I got an incredible guest. If you don't know him, you're going to love him. If you do know him, you already love him. Eugene Puryear is here to chat with me. We're gonna cover a whole bunch of shit. So just hang in there, buckle your seatbelts, don't put your pants on. Also, after I chat with Eugene, I'm going to talk about some of the craziness that everyone's freaking out about, the Great Reset and what the reality is. I'm going to chat about that and some other things, but we got a lot going on. Let me just make sure we're live on Rockfin as well. Give me 1 second. Also, if you do donate on the super chat, all the donations will go to people in need. If you are someone where, $100 or so could make a big difference, get you the next paycheck, get you some gas in your car to get to your job, then email commoncensored@protonmail.com. If you're struggling, we don't guarantee that we'll have enough, but we have so far. It's been working pretty well. So please do that. And thank you, Guillaume, for already taking your pants off. Yeah, what is it Graham says? Shave your knuckles for justice. Mine's get your pants off for justice, which sounds very disturbing. All right. This man's introduction is kind of ridiculous because he's done too much to actually list, but he has founded and hosts something now called Breakthrough News and the Punch Out. He's also a two-time vice presidential candidate. Here is Eugene Puryear.
Lee, thank you. Wow.
How you doing, man?
I'm doing well. I have too much glare in my glasses. I'm going to take my glasses off. I'm very good, very happy to be here. People always say they're honored to be on shows, so I just want people to know I'm a true Lee Camp. Okay? So I'm very, very honored to be here, man. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. Well, I'm honored to have you. I didn't, although, just to verify some dates and things, I looked up your Wikipedia, and it made me feel like a real underachiever. What was your first run for vice president of the United States was 20 what years old?
Yeah, I mean, that was, I guess, 2008. So, I was
22 or something.
22, something like that. I can't even remember now. I'm 35. Can't do math either. But yeah, it was a very young age in retrospect, man, and a crazy year because Obama was the candidate. But I'll say he reached such a crest of people believing he was going to win. There was actually less hostility time that I did it, because a lot of people were just like, oh, well, Obama's going to win. So it was almost like you were an oddity, because here you weren't constitutionally eligible. You're saying you're running against the system. You're running to tear it down. And people, it was just a weird dynamic that in a way I felt we got a better hearing that year than in 2016, where I felt that even though it was wide open, everyone hated Trump, everyone hated Hillary, it was sort of a big split between people who were like, we hear everything you're saying, which is why we're not voting, and people who were just felt, oh, we have to vote against Trump. So it's not that we didn't have a great campaign, but it was an interesting experience the two times. It was a little tougher campaigning in 2016, even though in retrospect, it feels like it was politically more favorable.
So in 08, you're saying you didn't have to deal with, like, I don't know, people calling you a race traitor and stuff?
No, believe it or not, that's like what we were girded for. But since no one really pays attention to the election, or at least back then, until after Labor Day, that rule was still kind of real, that, a lot of people were not even thinking about it when we were talking to them. And then once they really started thinking about the election, McCain had already kind of thrown it away a little bit as the economy was starting to slip, and he did that weird thing where he paused the campaign for 2 weeks. So it was an interesting moment where I think people were feeling very hopeful about Obama, but that moment of hope also contained within it a kernel of critical thinking of, like, maybe more is possible than we thought.
I want to get to a lot of topics. I was going to bring this up later, but as long as we're into it now, you ran on the Party for Socialism and Liberation. You helped co-found that, right?
Yes.
When you were 8 years old when you co-founded that, and and I ended up kind of dragged unintentionally into a debate over the past week where I did a video kind of tearing apart that fairly garbage AOC magazine interview that she did recently, acting like people can't stand up against Biden and calling on the ground protests, calling it unsophisticated essentially. Anyway, so that started a whole debate that I got dragged into over DSA and whether DSA actually stands for anything or can create change, or whether it can't create change. So DSA claims to also be socialist, yet they seem to be endorsing a lot of Democrats. What's your stance on that?
Yeah, I seen the debate going around. I mean, here's what I'll say about that. I think socialist is one of those terms that I think we're now learning, since everyone is a socialist, has a lot of different eddies and currents in it. But I think in the most basic sense, it means that you have to replace capitalism with a system that means something totally different. So from our point of view in PSL, and I think what distinguishes us from DSA, and listen, there are a lot of people I love in DSA. I've done a lot of great work with DSA, but there's obviously a difference between the two organizations, right? And I think the core of that difference is this. From our point of view, the history of the world, the history of this country, really going back as long as we can remember, ruling classes with a lot of wealth and a lot of power do not willingly give up a lot of wealth and a lot of power through democratic processes. And it doesn't mean that democracy is unimportant. It doesn't mean the right to vote is not big and that it's not something that we should fight for and that we should use in every possible arena to raise the issues that we can raise. But when we're really confronting what does it take, because that's the question we have to ask ourselves. I don't know if there's that many people who feel like we don't need something totally different than what we have. I mean, 59% of Democratic Party voters in South Carolina told the CNN exit poll they thought that the economy needed drastic change. But obviously, the majority of those people voted for Joe Biden. So I think the question that people are really asking themselves is not, do we need something different? How do we really do it? And I think what we've seen historically is even in the best case scenario. And to be honest with you, I think sort of if we look at lesser of two evil politics inside the Democratic Party politics, from my point of view, I think it's difficult to make a case that has been that effective in doing anything and arresting the move of the country to the right. But even in the best case scenario, in a way, right? Like even in we're getting more quote unquote Bernie-crats in and more people who are getting elected and all these different pieces. I mean, why does anyone think a movement is going to be allowed to develop that could potentially challenge the power of capital, that once it gets that level, they're not going to use every dirty trick and anti-democratic authoritarian mask off, glove off type of thing that they can possibly do? I mean, did Evo Morales not win the first election in Bolivia a year and a half ago? Obviously he did, but that kind of thing doesn't always matter. So from our point of view, the goal of building a political organization, it's not as if elections are bad. It's not as if people shouldn't try to get elected and win the confidence of the people and fight for whatever they can fight for. But we have to build a movement and a political organization that's rooted in an understanding not of the tactics. We need to be in elections. We need to march. We need self-defense against fascism. We need mutual aid. I mean, there's a lot of things that need to be done in the context of everyday life and moving us forward in a broad sense in terms of fighting against capitalism. But we need organizations that can bring all that together in an understanding that it's really a class-on-class battle of working class and oppressed people versus rich capitalists. I mean, you can offer as many concessions as you want. They're not going to change their spots. Just like the leaders of the Confederacy, it wasn't like Lincoln was going to end slavery, but why were they going to end something that was completely, beneficial to them? What ruling class has ever given up its own power willingly, regardless of what concessions you force them to make along the way? So that's the difference between PSL and DSA, is what we think ultimately the real hurdles are and what kind of organization it will take to be able to bring all those things together and confront that real question of power.
Yeah, what I've often said is, and I'm a big supporter of voting, and I do endless segments on how our system's rigged or how the franchise is being stolen from people. But at the same time, I also often say, look, these politicians in Congress and their elections and who's going to win should occupy maybe 5 to 10% of your time if you actually want to create change. If you want to talk about it because it's a soap opera or it's a sports game and you enjoy talking about that shit, then okay, that's fine. But if you're actually looking to change the world, then not much is going to happen in Congress.
No, I mean, no progressive Congress people ever get elected just randomly, right? I mean, it only happens in the context of movements that are in the streets. That, I mean, even if you just look at what is happening right now in the Derek Chauvin trial, I mean, I've seen many cops put on trial. I've never seen this many other cops testify against a cop and be like, nope, definitely not, shouldn't have done it, wasn't about it, we're against him, and so on and so forth. Right. And obviously self-interested, right? But I really do think, and I was there in Minneapolis during that uprising, that they are shook. And they think if this dude gets off, this could really get beyond our control. Yeah. And I think the reality of what we see historically when we look at that is, politics is about power, and concessions are about the fear that the power will grow out of your control and those you have been oppressing and exploiting will seek to replace you. And I think that so everything that happens under the conditions of quote unquote legality now, from elections to protest to civil disobedience and so on and so forth, I think is critically important, obviously, in advancing our cause, defending gains, and raising consciousness. But we also have to recognize that the gains we win against these powerful forces are wins, but only in a limited sense, because it's their way of trying to keep us back even further and not believe that we can govern ourselves. And that's what it really comes down to, is can average everyday people really run the government, or does it have to be an elite political class? And those people are going to fight to keep their position. And why would they not? I mean, they're certainly benefiting from it. The rest of us are the ones who are suffering.
Yeah, the oligarchs are not going to hand over their throne real easy. They're not going to stand back, and look at Occupy and go, "Wow, that's a lot of people in the street. All right, I guess we should just give it to them."
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, it's if you don't disrupt it. There's an amazing article from 2015 in the New Yorker. I think it's 2015, and this guy is talking about billionaires buying land in New Zealand. And he buries the lead about why they're buying the land, just that it's some disaster. And you think it's going to be like the zombie apocalypse or whatever. I don't know. They're rich, eccentric people, right? And then the deeper you get in the article, you're like, wow, there's a lot of rich people buying land in New Zealand. And then halfway through, he drops the through line and is like, what are they really afraid of? And the people are saying they were afraid of an uprising of poor people to come and killed him. And that was, and they were quoting this one billionaire who was trying to be the woke guy. And he was like, yeah, I keep arguing with all these people saying, wouldn't it just be easier if we raised the taxes on ourselves and did things? And no one seems to agree. They'd rather just plan to flee the country. But I think it speaks to the mentality of these people that even, obviously it's not all billionaires, but as the article was laying out, just the fact that that's an important subset of the billionaire class is people who are we're doing so many terrible things. Eventually, they're just going to rise up and kill us all. So we have to be prepared to flee the country to some foreign haven, like a feudal lord fleeing to his nephew's castle or something. I mean, it just speaks to the scale of political change that needs to happen in this country. To really make change, the type of people who need to be moved out of the way, and to think that they're going to allow just a legal democratic process. I mean, Trump is just one faction of the ruling class, and he tried to steal the election. So imagine if all of them, if everything they had was at stake, what they would do. So yeah, I think really have to be serious about historically. We talk about the Haitian Revolution. We talk about, 1776, however revolutionary, not revolutionary it was. We talk about the French Revolution. We talk about all these things historically as these great, fantastic things of average, everyday people, at least in the case of the Haitian Revolution, and the French Revolution, taking control of their own destiny and replacing these oligarchic systems with new, more democratic, more empowering, more equitable systems, or at least that's the story we tell ourselves. But it's only in the present that we're told to limit our imagination 100% to only what the system says is okay. Right. I think that's something to reflect on in terms of how we conceive our current moment.
Yeah, those are great points. Speaking of Haiti, you went down there, correct?
I was there for 8 days, came back last Wednesday.
Yeah, I want to hear all about it, and I could go into what's going on down there, but I imagine you'll give a better description anyway. So why don't you explain to those who haven't been following the protests in Haiti?
Yeah, for sure. So if you haven't been following sort of what's happening now, if you're just sort of tuning in and seeing big protests in Haiti, if you saw our coverage at BT Newsroom, um, you know, these protests are part of a cycle that began in January, but also part of a cycle that began in 2018. So just starting with right now, the basics. The so-called president of Haiti is a guy named Jovenel Moise. He has a party, PHTK party. His term ended on February 7th, but he just decided on February 7th that actually his term ends on February 7th, 2022. So just arbitrarily extended his term, in violation of the Constitution. Now, and then right after that, by the way, because the Supreme Court ruled that he couldn't do that, he just dissolved the Supreme Court and put the main justice in jail for launching a coup against him. A year ago, he had dissolved the legislature. He rules by decree. So the big protests are mainly about trying to get this guy Jovenel Moise out. Now, they're in a secondary way about also the fact that he gets a lot of support, primarily from the United States, but OAS, Canada as well, Europe, other countries that play a big role, and that they're having a distorting factor in the country. So people are upset about the level of intervention in the country and distorting the domestic politics. Now, the immediate situation is linked to the just sort of massive decline in support for Moise that began in 2018. Mm-hmm. So in the Caribbean, there's something called PetroCaribe, which is a program that for years was run by Venezuela that sent billions of dollars to development aid to pretty much all the Caribbean islands and also Nicaragua and some other countries. And there were $3.8 billion, I believe it was, allocated for Haiti that was stolen by Moise. And this came out in 2018 that he had stolen this money. So people were irate because their situation in Haiti, there's a lot of things to say about it, but certainly the issue of poverty, it's just a very neoliberal country. The issue of poverty, inequality, lack of public services, it's very evident. So to see that the president had just stolen almost $4 billion that was supposed to go to help people was just enraging. So then he pretty much loses he didn't have a ton of support, but really the bottom starts to fall out of his support. And there was a big cycle of protests in 2018. There was some repression against those protests, went down in 2019, started to pick back up at the end of 2020 coming into this year. So right now, basically the situation you have is you have this president trying to hang on. He's got a fake constitutional referendum coming up in June, fake elections coming up in September to cover his, own ass, basically, in terms of trying to look like a Democrat. And it's a real question now of, can he hold on? Can he force that through? Or will he be toppled? And it seems that there's a good chance it could kind of go either way, honestly, and that the role of the U.S. especially is giving him the thumb on the scale right now, Jovenel.
What was your experience like down there? Were you able to find protests and interview people? How was it?
It was an amazing trip. We were in the protests. There were big protests called on the 28th and the 29th for the 34th anniversary of the Constitution. He's overstayed. We were out there, on Sunday, which has been the big day for protests every week when they happen, are usually Sundays. Somewhere north of 100,000 people. It's hard to tell. So like Port-au-Prince is like a pretty sprawling metropolitan area. It's not really even clear how many millions of people live there. It's a big place. So people come from all over the area and they meet in an area called the Crossroads of Resistance, which is a fantastic name. And then the marches converge, but they can both converge and diverge. So like at one point, I think we were maybe in the midst of maybe like 30,000 people marching in one direction out of the Crossroads. There was like 40,000 people marching like into the Crossroads, same roads. And some people were like turning around and joining and going back the way they came with us. And other people were just like marching through us to get like back to the Crossroads of Resistance. Like that's where they were going. That's where they were going to end up. So it can be hard to tell, but it was huge throngs of people. Really the whole subset of society, like everyone from like the main group of Protestant churches to, socialists and communists and everything in between. So it's a huge broad opposition to him of whatever other differences people may have. We were able to definitely interview some people. We're working on hopefully getting a video out with some of those interviews soon. just working on getting the translations right and things like that. Giving a short video just to the sights and the sounds and the protests at BT Newsroom on all your social media when we get that out. But yeah, so we were able to see and do a lot. We were out in the countryside as well, about 4 hours out of Port-au-Prince and Saint Michel. So yeah, it was very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible what you're talking about. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of people protesting, and it gets essentially zero coverage in the United States. In the rare time they'll mention it, they generally get the story wrong or don't give any of the history involved. There's been very few statements by our politicians, except I know that there was a Biden tweet basically telling Haitians not to come to the United States.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it was wild to be there and to see that, and to think about the political messaging of it. I mean, the like tweet he put out, like the graphic was in Creole telling people don't come over here. But I thought it was notable that they felt the need to translate it. And this is the U.S. Embassy in Haiti into English so that like everyone knew what was said. I was telling people in Haiti, I was like, to be honest with you, I think the main audience for that is in the United States. And it was amazing just to see that despite all the rhetoric about being for immigrant rights and supporting immigrants, that here's Biden sending a message clear as day, is like, look at how tough I'm being on these Haitians. I'm keeping them out.
Yeah.
And I think that was a very notable moment about, I mean, he's deported hundreds of people to Haiti already this year. And it was so galling to me too, Lee, because I don't know if it was on the same day, but it was around the same day that Kamala Harris was like announced as like the czar or whatever for the border. And she's like, well, we got to deal with the root cause issues of immigration. And in Haiti, you are the root cause issue. And here you are telling people don't come over here.
Yeah, let's talk more about the border crisis. You just had a great episode of Punch Out, which is your podcast, which is part of Breakthrough News. I'm talking about the border crisis, and I mean it's hilarious that you have basically the same shit going on under Biden, yet they're trying to couch it as something different. Oh, we're completely not like Donald Trump. And even AOC put out some bizarre video where she goes, look, this is the fault of both parties, but this is nothing like Donald Trump, who ripped a baby out of the parents' arms, even though under the Biden administration, tens of thousands have already been deported. And you don't think some of those are parents having to leave their kids in the United States? So you still have families getting separated. It was a bizarre video where she's now like the face of the Democratic Party writ large, to defending Joe Biden's policies, which I mean, to me, really is insidious. But yeah, talk about what you've found about what's going on at the border and whether the Biden administration is making any difference.
Yeah, I mean, it's an unbelievable thing, and it's there's I ripped the mainstream media a lot, so I will say this. There's a pretty good article in the New York Times today about TPS holders interviewing a woman with TPS from El Salvador. Biden has still not decided if he's going to, extend it.
TPS is temporary protected status, right?
Temporary protective status. And the article noted that if they don't go through with renewing the program, that it would be the largest family separation probably in the history of the United States. And you think that would be something that in the first 100 days, he would say, oh, of course, we'll extend that for 8 years, or sign some paperwork so people don't have to worry about it before you deal with something else. But yeah, I think the border crisis, the whole thing about how it's not the same as Trump, to me, and this is one of the things that I noted in my piece, is so unbelievable to me, because family separations are terrible, and I'm happy to hear that it seems like there's not that many of them. But on the other hand, these are unaccompanied minors. So from my point of view, the level of responsibility is significantly higher from the point of view of everyone involved. And even if the situation is as the Biden people are saying, which I don't think it is, I'll get to that. Even if the issue is as what the Biden people are saying is, well, there's nothing else we can do. This is just the situation we have. I don't know why I should be commending you for that, because ultimately, when I'm looking at your administration, half the policies y'all were doing under Obama are why people are sending the unaccompanied minors here. So you're basically telling me that you caused the problem, that no one took any effort to prepare for the consequences. And now that we're reaping the roots of your original policy and your total lack of preparedness for its consequences, you somehow want to be credited for being better than Donald Trump. Even in their best case scenario, it seems unbelievable to me. And I think it's so cynical for people to say that. And I think that's what it really comes down to is, why were they campaigning all last year saying we're going to do, of course they were highlighting one issue and saying family separations. And if, Jen Psaki got on here, she would say, well, he didn't say he was going to change everything. He just said he was going to change this, that, and the third. But they obviously implied that there were not going to be kids in cages on the border, that they weren't going to be holding people in terrible situations and so on and so forth, especially children. And they had to have known that this was going to happen if there was a big surge and that they weren't ready. So I think just that from the get-go, because when you look at the situation, like even the existing system of shelters under DHS that take these young people who are in the cages from Border Patrol when they take them out of there, the existing system of permanent shelters, so outside of all emergencies, is contracting out with certain agencies where kids have been sexually abused, one where a kid was choked out and physically abused. And these are like on the list of shelters. So this is a long-term problem that, any incoming administration and all the people they know and these people who claim they've been in government for so long must know is there. So if even the existing system has not been up to par for so long, I've never really heard you speak out that much about it. You campaigned as if that wasn't the case. And then you show up and then say, oh, well, there's nothing we can do. That doesn't sound like a nothing we can do. It sounds like you just lied about the capabilities and didn't make it clear, and that you didn't do anything in the past. And I think some of that is because the Democrats don't want to draw attention to the fact that they created this massive crisis by saying, hey, we need to spend a lot more money preparing for tens of thousands of unaccompanied minors to come to this country because we ruined Honduras by supporting a coup. So it's an interesting piece. The emergency issue, the other thing it's huge, they're cutting all sorts of safety corners now to try to find a way to get as many of these young people somewhere so they can try to get them out of Border Patrol custody, because they don't want the photos of kids in cages sleeping under these emergency blankets. So even if they send them to shelters with people who are totally unlicensed, where people have abused kids, they're looking at that as the next level. So it's a total system failure. I don't think anyone deserves any credit for it. Most of the people implicated at the highest levels have been involved in all the issues leading up to this pretty much, and then lied about it in the course of their campaign to make people think they were really going to do something. And now we're all, especially these young kids, reaping the consequences. So it's a terrible situation. And I just feel people are exploiting I don't know. It's like you say you don't have any consequences when you're the one who set it up so that there's no other options.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right that it's our foreign policy that's creating this situation. Also what we're doing to Venezuela as well with our economic war against them. And sorry to bring up AOC again, but weirdly, she did another video where she said, listen, we can't talk about the border crisis without talking about our foreign policy. And she says, I don't know if she uses the word empire, but something about the what we've done in other countries. And it's kind of like, and Danny Haifong tweeted about this. It's like, wait a second, you're admitting that the United States is responsible for this, yet you won't stand up against our economic war in Venezuela, won't stand up about Haiti, won't stand up about Bolivia or Ecuador. So it's kind of bizarre to give a little lip service to this and then not do anything about the problem.
Yeah, I mean, I saw that and I said, well, I mean, okay, yeah, great, fine, but why were you meeting with people who were supporting the Bolivian coup? I mean, it just definitely on so many levels. I mean, the recent comments that were made around Palestine where, there was a kind of a nothing statement made, which in and of itself is a statement. When someone asks you about the Palestinian issue and you seem to be evading the question, I think says so much. And yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where I think people love to sort of speak when it's convenient. People like to sort of speak to something that seems that removes responsibility from them. So when the issue is the Democrats supporting imperialist foreign policy, like when AOC was asked about Venezuela and she said, I'm going to follow what the leadership says, it's not to rag on her unfairly, but I think it is fair to point out that if you're going to say, well, we can't be that mad at the situation now because it's more than just what's happening. It's more than Biden. It's imperialism. It's all these other things. Well, then when imperialism is doing its work, you also have to take responsibility for what imperialism is doing and stand up against it. And I mean, I've never known her to be outspoken on any of the issues that you listed. or many other foreign policy issues, quite frankly. And I think that it's been notable. It's been one of the more notable factors. I mean, she's not alone. I mean, I remember watching the congressional hearing in the House Foreign Affairs Committee about the Venezuela sanctions, and it was the most disgusting things. You had all these Democrats who kind of wanted some credit for being against sanctions, but they were so afraid of being seen as pro Maduro. Joaquin Castro, a couple of these other people. Oh my man. Oh God, I hate this guy from Connecticut. Anyway, and so they're all trying to posture. They're trying to do their thing, but they don't want to say too much. And I just said,
they're trying to get the Bernie Sanders and the Tulsi Gabbard voters.
Exactly. And it just felt wow, this is so unbelievable and so soft. And I think it's progressive Democrats in general, really, who have a huge, or so-called progressive Democrats, seem to have a huge blind spot when it comes to imperialism, and other than maybe one or two people who have been consistent for years on talking about war and peace issues, it seems as if it's an inconvenience oftentimes when people are even asked, almost if they're annoyed to be asked. So then when I see people try to come when they're trying to explain something in a way that then sort of remove, if it's about all these big things, you can't really blame me for it kind of way, which is how I kind of took that, then it just feels disingenuous on so many different
that's a good point. These people, even the ones that are kind of good on some domestic stuff, they're horrible on issues of hegemony and empire. I remember one that really stood out to me was Elizabeth Warren when she was because this wasn't about a vote, where there's a lot of things playing. This was literally her 5 minutes to question General Mattis when he was being approved to be Secretary of Defense. And it's you've got a known war criminal who's bombed wedding parties and said he would do it again. And it's so let's see. She's the so-called one of the liberal icons, Let's see how she nails him. She could still vote for him, but let's see how she asks some really tough questions. And her whole 5 minutes was literally, do you believe in innovation? And Mattis was oh my God, we love innovation. Innovation's the best. We innovate all the time. And that was it. And I was what in the fuck? You have 5 minutes to grill a war criminal. You're
asking about his task force experiences working on AI or whatever. No, it's a sad state of affairs. It is.
I don't want to use up all your time, so let's just squeeze in 2 more minutes here about economics. You also had an episode recently about JP Morgan Chase and Jamie Dimon talking about how the economy in the United States is about to come back and everything's going to be great, and we're going to go back to everything being awesome because everything was going perfect before, and here we come. And is that what's going to happen?
I think that's definitely not going to happen. I could be wrong. I'm always happy to be wrong. But yeah, Jamie Dimon, unbelievable. You look at the nature of the economy right now, and basically what you have had since the economic crisis of 2001, really, the dot-com bubble, is a huge amount of money that is pumped into the stock market and the financial system for, very cheap costs of lending, and that drives large asset bubbles that create some level of economic activity until the thing runs off the rails. That's how decrepit capitalism is without trillion-dollar shots, basically, of adrenaline. The economy cannot operate. It can't get up off the mat. And when you look at what's happening right now, I think, obviously there's going to be rapid seeming growth because things were so far down in 2020. You can come back from that and still be very bad. Right now, we're at about 11 million jobs less than we had in February of 2020, just before the pandemic. And you look at some of the other just wild warning signs that are definitely out there. First and foremost, you've got this, major issue, maybe one of the biggest scandals that's out there that no one knows about, Wall Street on Parade. Pam and Russ Martins have been reporting on this starting in September of 2019, so well before the crisis, the pandemic, until mid-March, really, so right in the beginning of the pandemic. The Federal Reserve gave $9 trillion to the repo loan market, which is basically one of the main ways hedge funds and banks and money market funds lend money back and forth to one another. So I don't know how that's any way that was the case unless there is some huge issue. And I think when you look at things, and there's been $11 trillion, by the way, in the same market by September of 2020. So obviously, if you have $11 trillion in like basically 1 year, that's totally decrepit. You've got $2 trillion worth of money lended out to zombie firms. That means they don't even make enough money to pay their own debts, the interest on their own debts, I should say. So they should be defaulting, but for various reasons they don't. But they can. That there are all these just obviously opaque bets and things that are going on. That hedge fund, Archios or whatever, that collapsed last week, that's just because people are just randomly trading stuff like between one another with no regulations, no nothing, whatever, and lying about what they have and all these other pieces. So I say all that just to say that, the way the economy is coming back is kind of the same thing, is they're just continuing to pump this super cheap money into there. People are borrowing hundreds of billions of dollars, by the way, to invest in the stock market. Most of the money going into the stock market right now is money other people are borrowing. And it's building on top of building on top of building. And we've all built sandcastles. We've all built houses of cards. There's enough integrity to it that, if someone doesn't blow hard, if it doesn't rain or whatever, you could keep the thing up for a while. No doubt about that. But if any one of these little pieces, like instead of a $10 billion hedge fund, if it's JP Morgan losing $600 billion, the whole thing can completely collapse overnight. And so I think it's kind of like a false dichotomy where you can have economic growth seeming to happen, but it's not quality growth. And it's really just frothiness on the top of something. And it could be a deeper sign that the economy, just like 2001, just like 2008, just like last year, and just before what it looked like was going to happen before the pandemic happened, the economy can drop down in a huge way.
Yeah, and I mean, what we largely have now is a plutonomy, which is basically just behaving. The stock market's just looking at the behavior of the rich, and the super rich are doing great during this pandemic. But at the end of the day, that's still on top of the backs of millions upon millions of people that are barely getting by. Some of them have 12 months of rent they haven't paid, and when they lift the moratorium, it's like that 12 months worth of rent's not going to appear in their pockets all of a sudden. So it's crazy what's coming down the pike, and meanwhile the rich are extracting as much wealth as they can.
Absolutely. I mean, it's so fake. That's the thing. When and that's why I like talking about the economy, that I really think people should not feel afraid to say and think that like everything happening on Wall Street is like completely ridiculous, totally absurd, and most of it is fake. I mean, just think about the fact that Tesla has a higher market value than General Motors. You cannot go to a Tesla dealership and buy a car. They put you on a list to send you a car at some other date, and they often miss those dates in their
And they've never been profitable.
They've never been profitable. So it's basically like a bunch of people who are like, this seems cool, so we're going to keep giving you huge amounts of money, but it has no basis in reality whatsoever. And I think we're sort of shamed into like, well, if you don't bail out the banks, that the whole thing's going to collapse. And we're shamed into believing that somehow this is like good and we just don't understand it. But it's the worst possible system that you could have. And I think definitely there is no compunction, no economic mumbo jumbo that can make it untrue, that it's almost all totally fake and absurd. And we pay the price for just these, like, I think this is cool bets that go bad.
Yeah. I mean, I've been railing about how the stock market's been a Ponzi scheme for years now, but people don't seem to want to jump onto that boat. So.
Well, they're all, as everyone who's got on Robinhood in the past 6 months, as everyone loses that money over the next, you're going to be the new prophet.
So thank you so much, Eugene. And your outlet is called Breakthrough News. Is that breakthroughnews.org?
Yeah, we're at breakthroughnews.org and at BT Newsroom across all your social media platforms.
Yeah, and you're just doing incredible work, and keep it up, man.
Hey, man, thank you so much, Lee. I really appreciate you, man. Good stuff as always.
Thanks, Eugene. All right, guys, definitely check out Eugene's stuff. And, if you're looking for a daily rundown of news, I know I only have, 3 podcasts going, but if you need more than my 3 podcasts, Moment of Clarity, Common Sense and Government Secrets, then look up Punch Out with Eugene Puryear. It's like a 15-minute roughly per day rundown of the news, and he does an incredible job. As you saw, he knows his shit. There's not a smarter guy out there, so definitely check that out. Okay, I want to talk about the Great Reset for a few minutes here. It has become, the Great Reset is kind of hilarious because it has the far right and some of the far left like uniting in a weird way but calling it some massive conspiracy that's going to take over your life, but in a slightly different way. The far right is saying it's the great socialist takeover of the world. And then some members of the far left are saying it's the great. I don't know exactly. It is another takeover of the world, but it's capitalist takeover of the world. But they already own the world, so I don't know. So I did some reading on it, and I come down on basically in the same ballpark as Naomi Klein and Russell Brand and Peter Joseph. Now, Naomi Klein has done many things I have complaints with. I loved her shock doctrine from her book Shock Doctrine from a while back. I love No Logo. She did some great work. But then, in the past several years, she's been doing a lot of things that kind of align with big green, and not the good green outfits, but the green outfits that seem like they're basically just trying to create a veil of look, capitalism can be green, and we can, if we just put up 12 wind turbines, then we can go ahead and continue to destroy the planet. I'm not saying she's saying that, but she seems to be doing a lot of events with those type of people, and so either she's not looking into it or something. But so I have my complaints. So I'm not saying that Naomi Klein is perfect, but. And then I'll explain that in a second. But anyway, I wanted to read some excerpts from her article in The Intercept because I think she gets it mostly right, to try and explain to those who don't know what the Great Reset is, and to those who know, to maybe clarify some things. So this is from her article. Back in June, the World Economic Forum, best known for its annual Davos Summit, kicked off a lunge for organizational relevance. The effort was called the Great Reset, and through articles, videos, webinars, etc., the World Economic Forum founder, Klaus Schwab, put out by him, it provided a coronavirus-themed rebranding of all the things Davos has been doing anyway, now hastily repackaged as a blueprint for reviving the global economy post-pandemic by, quote, seeking a better form of capitalism. Now, is that a red flag right there when they say seeking a better form of capitalism? Is that, hey, we're trying to prop up this dying thing that has destroyed our environment, destroyed our lives, enslaved everyone to jobs they hate. Here's the good, the way it's going to work well, the way you're going to like it. So that should be a red flag right there. The Great Reset was a place to hawk for-profit techno fixes to complex social problems. To hear for-profit, keyword there. To hear heads of transnational oil giants opine about the urgent need to tackle climate change. Is that another red flag? To listen to politicians say the things they say during crises, that this is a tragedy, but also an opportunity, that they are committed to building back better and ushering in a fairer, greener, healthier planet. Do you really think the richest people in the world have gotten together to make a cleaner, healthier planet? Or do you think they've gotten together to try and stave off the critics of capitalism a little bit longer so they can keep enriching themselves and keep being the wealthiest people on the planet? It involved Prince Charles and the head of the IMF. They figured prominently. The Great Reset encompasses some good stuff that won't happen, some bad stuff that certainly will, and frankly, nothing out of the ordinary in our era of green billionaires readying rockets for Mars. Indeed, anyone with even a cursory knowledge of Davos speak and the number of times it has attempted to rebrand capitalism as a slightly buggy, she means problematic, as it's got some issues, a slightly buggy poverty alleviation and ecological restoration program. You know, capitalism, the environmental ecological restoration program. Doesn't that sound like your logo for capitalism? Anyway, she's saying that this is nothing new for Davos. Davos has done this regularly, tried to rebrand capitalism as something it's not, so that people will not run at them with pitchforks. She says through its highly influential global competitiveness report, the WEF has played a leading role in the transnational campaign to liberate capital. Does that not sound like a fucking goddamn euphemism? Like that just doesn't it, just saying that doesn't it taste a little like shit? Just liberate capital. Anytime someone says they need their capital liberated, fucking kick them in the balls. If it's a woman, poke them in the eyes. Liberate capital from all the encumbrances, because capital's had a really tough time. It really has. You know, it's just the rich can't do their shit, man. They're trying, but their capital is just so tied down, and it's just really hard. It's really hard, you guys, to be this rich, because the capital won't do what I wanted it to. She gives examples of liberate capital from the encumbrances, like robust regulation, protections for local industries, progressive taxation, and nationalizations. Oh, those all sound like horrible things, don't they? Except every single one of them helps people tremendously. So they want to stop that. They want to stop that list, right? Regulation, people nationalizing entities like trains and oil fields and stuff. And most of you know, nationalization means that it's not owned by a corporation. So, for example, in Venezuela, when they now we have stopped most of their oil production, but when they were allowed to have their own oil production, a lot of the proceeds would go back to the people, and it wouldn't go to a tiny number of corporate oligarchs that own the oil fields. And the United States, one of the big reasons that we are dying to get into Venezuela is to get their oil, to take it away from nationalization and allow our corporate entities to again exploit it and again get rich off it. And in fact, John Bolton said that on Fox News. He said the quiet part loud. He said getting into Venezuela and getting their oil would be really great for Americans. You can go watch the clip. So anyway, to continue here, Naomi Klein says, the Great Reset is merely the latest edition of this gilded tradition, barely distinguishable from earlier Davos big ideas. So she's about to list earlier Davos themes that they had similar to the Great Reset. One was called Shaping the Post-Crisis World in 2009. One was called Rethink, Redesign, Rebuild. One was called The Great Transformation in 2012. Sound familiar? The Great Reset, The Great Transformation. And who can forget, quote, creating a shared future in a fractured world, 2018. So if you're starting to get the point, Davos does this. Davos is a bunch of billionaires that get together and try and rebrand capitalism so that it is something that people will think is going to work for them and is going to help the planet. And they create videos of how terrible things are. It shows pollution and everything else. And then they show after the Great Transformation or the Great Reset or the shared future, after those words come across, then all of those awful things, all of the logging and the pollution become nice forests and green fields and people skipping. Now that video could be used also to show the horrors of capitalism. The beginning of the video could say, here's under capitalism. And then the second half of the video could say, after capitalism, after humans evolved to a better economic system, socioeconomic system, something based on our resources, like a resource-based economy, then we'd have this green, lush, good forest, all that stuff. So this same video could be used to do that, but they're not doing that, right? They want you to think that under capitalism, we just need to have the great transformation or the great reset or the great shared future, and then all will be well. This is all a tactic to stop the pitchforks, all right? That's what it is. So then Naomi Klein goes into the Great Reset has managed to mash up every freak out happening on the internet, left, right, truish, and off the wall. She says truish because, a good conspiracy. And by the way, I hate the term conspiracy because people think it every time it's used, it's false. But there's conspiracies all the time, right? The Democrats and Republicans right now are deciding how to rule our fates, rule our lives. They're conspiring together to do that. Even if it's just the Democrats getting together, they conspire together to how they're going to pass bills and things like that. We know that, for example, Facebook deleted a lot of left-wing sites, and simultaneously Twitter deleted the Twitter accounts of the editors of those sites. So they did that at the same time, meaning they conspired. So it's a conspiracy theory, but it's obviously true. So conspiracy does not mean false. However, the false conspiracies will often take a lot of points that are very true. Bill Gates is one of the richest people in the world and a fucking asshole and wants to own the world's fucking health systems and farming. And he's a terrible human being. See, that's true. And Bill Gates is also part of this Davos plan. So they'll take the true stuff like that, and then they'll throw in stuff that's fake, for Tucker Carlson. Well, we'll get to this in a second in the article, but for Tucker Carlson and those, the fake part is they're gonna implant socialism on your life. They're all trying to make everything socialist. And it's like, are they really? Are the most powerful, richest capitalists in the world trying to create socialism, Tucker? Is that what's happening? Anyway, so she says this has become a mashup of false conspiracies. It's turned into a meta scream about the unbearable nature of pandemic life under voracious capitalism. So she says there has been a tsunami of real examples of the real shock doctrine, the concept she came up with, which is very obviously used endlessly during this pandemic, but in a lot of times. There's been a lot of examples of the real shock doctrine. Trump's attacks on Washington's regulatory architecture, Education Secretary Betsy DeVos's amped up campaign for school choice, rather than, say, giving public schools the resources they just need. Silicon Valley's multi-headed power grab, the Modi government's cruel attack on price protections for India's farmers. So all of those are shock doctrine done during the pandemic to fuck people over. So yes, the shock doctrine is going on right now. That's indisputable. So then she says the Great Reset is not a serious effort to actually solve the crises it describes. On the contrary, it's an attempt to create a plausible impression that the huge winners in this system are on the verge of voluntarily setting greed aside to get serious about solving the raging crises that are radically destabilizing our world. Laura Ingraham, Tucker Carlson, and Ben Shapiro have all been terrifying their huge audiences with claims that green socialism is about to be forced down their throats via Klaus Schwab's Great Reset. For right-wing politicians and the oil companies that back them, the more climate action can be conflated with an organization known, and she's talking about Davos, known for its traffic jams of private jets. Yes, they literally have traffic jams of private jets. And their Bond villain founder, she means Klaus Schwab, the easier it will be to resist any climate plan at all. That's why the earliest alarmism about the Great Reset came from the Heartland Institute, ground zero, which is a far right-wing organization, ground zero of the climate change denial machine. So this is being used by the right wing to conflate it with any sort of climate action and say, look, it's all one and the same. Climate action equals horrible socialism put forward by Bill Gates and Klaus Schwab. When in fact, these are horrible billionaires trying to protect capitalism and trying to protect it from what they see on the horizon, which is people standing up, people furious, people done with wage slavery in a time where we should all have far more leisure. We should be working like 1 day a week. I mean, think about the amount of shit that actually has to get done in this world, like really needs to. I don't mean the bullshit. I don't mean, fucking endless ads and fucking endless marketing and shopping endlessly and fucking 45,000 Starbucks on every corner. And there's tons of shit that doesn't need to get done. But if we were just doing the shit that we really needed to have a good life, each of us would work 1 day a week and we'd spend the next 6 enjoying our lives, following our passions, reading, watching stuff that we found important or informative, getting to know our family for the first time, actually meeting them. And that's how it should be. But instead, we're all fucking collapsing under the amount of work that most people have to do in order to have an okay life. And they don't want to question that. These are billionaires that do not want you asking that question. And so the Great Reset is yet another attempt by the billionaires to rebrand capitalism, to rebrand it as not something that's destroying our planet, destroying our lives, destroying our relationships, destroying our minds in so many ways. And I'd say the where I disagree with I think both Russell Brand and Peter. Peter's awesome, by the way. I'm good friends with Peter, but is they each threw in 1 or 2 lines where they said, this could be good. What they're doing in Davos with the Great Reset could be good intentioned, but it's not being done right, or it's not good. It's garbage or whatever. So they got the end result right, but good intentioned, fucking no. All right, these guys are not good intentioned. They're not trying to help things. They're trying to save their own insane greed. Insane. They're trying to protect their own insane fortunes. That is what the World Economic Forum is all about. And that is what this Great Reset thing is meant to do. Now, there are many things within it that may have been mentioned in various, Great Reset video or article or book or something that are also terrible ideas being done by the wealthy and the oligarchs. I don't know all of the surveillance measures that they talk about, but yes, I am obviously opposed to all that shit. I am opposed to endless surveillance. I'm opposed to giving away your privacy to the fucking rulers. And let's be clear, they want to take every remaining bit of your privacy. But all of that can go on and it not be the Great Reset. People are trying to act like, oh no, the Great Reset is this plan that they're going to do these things. They're trying to do that anyway. They want to take away your privacy and surveil you anyway. They want to stop cash transactions and make it all on a credit card so they can monitor it all anyway. So it's the people, and I don't even mean the right wingers, but the left wingers, I think they're on the right path, but they've kind of overstated what this is. We should be furious. We should be angry. We should be standing up against it. But if you're spending a lot of time focusing on this pathetic attempt to rebrand capitalism, then you're probably not focusing on what's really important. But let's be clear, not good intentioned. There is no good intentions there. Now, there may be good intentions of those who spoke, who were asked to speak and don't understand how this shit works. So I saw that they said David Attenborough was one of the speakers, and David Attenborough is obviously this elderly at this point, but very sweet as far as I know, naturalist who has a great and grizzled voice, and so he voices all of the fucking Planet Earth and all the video stuff you see. It seems like it's always voiced by him. Now, I don't know anything about him, but his intentions may be good intentioned. He may be good intentioned. He's an old man talking about how we need to save the hippos. So that may be quite in good intention. But I'm talking about the people who come up with this shit, the people who write books about it, the people who are slamming it down our throats like Prince, whichever, Charles, is it? Yeah, they're not good intention. They're trying to protect their asses is what they're doing. They're rebranding capitalism to try and protect themselves. All right, guys, that is the show. Thank you for being here. I do these every single weekday, except sometimes, and they're at leecamp.com. For those of you who donated, all of the donations will be given to those in need. If you are desperately in need, email commoncensored@protonmail.com. Like I've said, we can't, it's not thousands of dollars, so you're not going to get rich off it. But it is maybe a little help for those who need it. My other podcasts are called, obviously, Common Censored, but then Government Secrets with Graham Elwood and Moment of Clarity. So I hope you'll check those out. Redacted Tonight comes out every week, and you can get it all at leecamp.com. And we've switched away from Patreon over to liberapay.com/leecamp, liberapay.com/leecamp. Okay, guys, thank you so much, and keep fighting.